Okay, so if you're ambitious, you're driven, but maybe, just maybe, you're a little allergic to the whole self-help aisle, this one is for you. Today we are diving into Dan Harris's book, 10% Happier. And let me tell you, it is a deeply pragmatic and, honestly, pretty hilarious journey. We're going to see how a super skeptical news anchor learned to tame that voice in his head without, and this is key, without losing his edge. It all kicks off with a problem that I think every single one of us gets. That voice. You know the one. That internal narrator that's just kind of heckling us all day long. For Harris, he was totally oblivious to it, right up until it almost cost him everything. It's the most intimate part of our lives, and for so many of us, man, it is our biggest critic. So for a guy like Dan Harris, what did this inner voice actually look like? I mean, from the outside, the guy seemingly had it all. He was a successful anchor for ABC News, chasing huge stories all over the globe. But on the inside, well, that was a totally different story. A storm was definitely brewing.
I love how he describes it here. It's so vivid. It's not just random thoughts, right? He calls it a malevolent puppeteer. Think about that. It's that part of your mind that has you endlessly scrolling on your phone when you know you should be working, or has you replaying that one awkward thing you said 3 days ago. It's this force that is almost always pulling us out of what's happening right now.
And for Harris, this inner voice wasn't just there by accident. It was trained. His dad, a brilliant doctor, lived by this mantra right here. The price of security is insecurity. He basically taught his son that constant, gnawing worry was the secret sauce to success. And Harris completely internalized it, believing that this state of hypervigilance was the only way to stay on top of his game.
And this slide perfectly illustrates the cost of that whole philosophy. His ambition takes him from local news right into war zones in Afghanistan and Iraq. But that adrenaline from combat, it became an addiction. And when he came home, he fell into this undeclared low-grade depression. So to cope, he started using actual drugs, cocaine and ecstasy. It all came to a head in 2004, when that constant pressure just boiled over, and he had a full-blown panic attack, live on national television. A complete and utter professional nightmare. So that on-air meltdown, that was rock bottom. That was the moment he knew, okay, I have to find a fix. But for a cynical, hard-nosed journalist, where do you even begin? As you can imagine, his search took him to some, well, let's just say unexpected places. He started where a lot of people do, the self-help section. He picked up Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, and was immediately conflicted. He felt like a tourist in what he called an open-air zoo of spirituality, and he was approaching this whole thing with a massive dose of skepticism. This right here captures his frustration perfectly. On one hand, Tolle offered what Harris said was a spot-on diagnosis of the human condition, this idea that our ego, that inner narrator, is the source of all our misery. Makes sense. But then, in the very next breath, Tolle would make some bizarre, pseudoscientific claim that just sent his journalist's BS detector into overdrive. It was this maddening mix of real wisdom and what he called folderol. He was so close to just giving up, convinced that this whole self-help world was a total dead end. But then, the real breakthrough came, and it wasn't from some modern guru, but from an ancient tradition, just repackaged for a modern skeptic.
The turning point was his wife, Bianca. She handed him a book by a Dr. Mark Epstein, who was a Harvard-trained psychiatrist who also happened to be a practicing Buddhist. And this was the perfect bridge for him. Epstein framed Buddhism not as a religion, but as a practical, psychological toolkit for your mind. Harris suddenly realized that all the best parts of Tolle's work were really just Buddhism, but stripped of all the confusing jargon.
And at the heart of this entire toolkit was one core concept, mindfulness. Now, the crucial point here, the thing to really get, is that it's not about stopping your thoughts or clearing your mind. That's impossible. It's about developing the ability to just watch your thoughts and feelings come and go without getting yanked around by them. It's a simple idea, but honestly, it's a radical one. So, okay, he's got the theory, but how do you actually train this skill? I mean, how do you do it? For Harris, it meant doing something that his old self would have absolutely mercilessly mocked.
He went on a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And he didn't frame it as some spiritual quest. No, for him, it was a mental boot camp. And it was brutal. His mind revolted, he was bored, he was sleepy, and his inner monologue was just screaming at him. He was forced, really for the first time ever, to just sit with the chaos of his own mind without a single distraction. But through that really painful process,
He learned the single most important skill of all. He calls it the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is that knee-jerk emotional impulse when somebody cuts you off in traffic. Responding is creating just enough space, a tiny pause, between that feeling and your action to actually choose what you do next. It's all about the pause.
And this is why it matters so much. This ability to not get hijacked by your own emotions is what a friend of his called a superpower. It actually becomes a competitive edge in your life, that ability to be the calmest person in the room when everyone else is losing their cool.
Now remember, Harris is a journalist, right? So he wasn't just going to take all this on faith. He needed evidence. And as it turns out, there's a surprising amount of hard science to back all of this up.
Which brings us to his brilliant, and I mean brilliantly realistic, slogan.
10%. It's not about achieving some magical state of permanent bliss. Let's be real, that's just not a thing. But can meditation make you 10% happier? The genius of this idea is that it speaks directly to us skeptics. It's an honest tagline in an industry that's famous for overpromising, and it offers a return on investment that feels both attractive and, most importantly, achievable.
And here's the science that really seals the deal. Get this. Studies from places like Harvard show that meditation physically changes your brain. It thickens the gray matter in the parts of your brain used for self-awareness and compassion. And it actually shrinks the amygdala, which is basically the brain's fight or flight panic button. This is neuroplasticity in action. It proves your brain isn't fixed. You can literally train it, just like a muscle. Happiness, it turns out, is a skill you can build.
So, all of this brings us to the final and most important question. Harris found his answer, but what about you? What would a 10% reduction in reactivity look like in your job or in your relationships? What would you do with that superpower? It's a pretty compelling question to think about.